President Cyril Ramaphosa met with representatives of organised business this week to discuss more effective, cooperative and coordination between government, businesses and other social partners. Now this week, the chairperson of Business Unity South Africa and chancellor of the University of the Free State, Professor Bonang Mohale, will address scores of young people and government leaders on entrepreneurship and the need to kickstart the economy as part of the Empowa Youth Transformation Week. Well, he joins us now to discuss this further. A very good morning to you, Professor Mohale. Always a pleasure chatting to you. Let's talk about some of your plans for this address to young people, because as you and I stand right now, if we have to look at the stats, South Africa has the highest unemployment rate in the world, and the country's youth unemployment crisis at 74.8% for those between the ages of 15 and 24 has now been deemed a catastrophe.
Empowa, thank you for having me. It's actually a national disaster. That's why in absolute numbers, we are talking about 11.9 million people that are unemployed and 9 million young people that are not in education, employment and training. 6 million young people don't know their fathers. Only 30% of households in South Africa have both a mother and a father, whilst only 16 million people were gainfully employed pre-COVID, and we know that we have lost another million jobs. So if you think on average that these are probably looking on average at about another 5 people, that's another 10 million people that we have just added into those people that are living below the poverty datum line, as defined as a combined household income of a measly 850 rand per month. So until and unless we can do something interventionist, deliberate, purposeful and conscious, we are accelerating towards a wall at an alarming speed. And it's up to us to make sure that we stop this. So the Empower Youth is a conversation that starts today, will take the whole week, and we are saying let's develop entrepreneurship. But much more importantly, we are saying let's teach young people, together with all of us, to say we need to create our own businesses and hire our own children. Because it's madness that we continue to make babies and then we send them to a different neighborhood to go on their knees and ask for somebody else for a job. I think we'll be demonstrating to them that, you know, if we don't think for ourselves, we place our future in the hands of others. It is up to us to create our own new world. We want to impress upon them that a nation that hates its own informed and intelligentsia and enlightened is doomed to fail. We want to say, how do you belong to myself in order to be present for others? Because in this world, at this time, in this era when so many of us dare to hope that joy and peace will prevail, we are unlikely to make it on our own mental.
Absolutely. In fact, as you speak about the importance of creating young entrepreneurs, I'm reminded of what Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana had spoken of when he said that essentially the young people in South Africa are stuck in a cycle of dependence, which is something to really take note of.
Actually, the difference between those young people that will do well and those that are condemned to a self-perpetuating vicious cycle of abject poverty, it's simple. The one is born in Bryanston, the other one is born in Alexandra. So the one that is born in Alexandra is born of poor parents, born in pain and suffering, and is likely to beget poor children and unlikely to get out of this self-perpetuating vicious cycle of abject poverty. Now, as a government, instead of giving them boots and bootstraps with which they can pull themselves up, we are now giving them more dependency by saying, no, be on social security. No, go and apply for temporary social relief of 350. You look at the numbers, I mean, there was already 17 million people on social security. The people that applied for this 350 a month were 13 million. Only 5.6 million were successful. That's 24 million people. And yet we haven't even done anything about the spatial apartheid playing. Because most people, like the community in Orange Farm, lives on average 40 kilometers away from their places of work. As a result, they spend a minimum of 40 minutes going to work, another 40 minutes coming back from work, which then means that 40% of their salary goes to getting them to and from work, just to transport. If you add food, that's 70% of their income. These are the people that we are now rendering absolutely hopeless because it's impossible for them to save. And then we wonder why we have both the lowest levels of savings compared to our BRICS counterparts, but also the continuing stubbornly high levels of unemployment that then lead to increasing levels of poverty and increasing levels of inequality. And it is relative inequality that leads to social strife. In fact, even when we wanted to celebrate the good news from Stats SAA 3 weeks ago, when they released the results to say the GDP for Q2 is now positive 1.2%, we wanted to celebrate. But you see, because we think for ourselves, we then say, how in honest do we celebrate 1.2% positive GDP growth when population growth is 1.6%, which means we're going backwards. But even if you do just crude arithmetic, if interest rates are 6%, CPI, inflation I'm talking about, is 3%, it stands to reason that therefore GDP growth must be at least 3 percentage points just to stand still. So we are going backwards. Mempo, you and I, together with the cost of borrowing for government and for business, has actually gone up. And yet the quantum of debt has stayed the same. In fact, our discretionary purchasing power, therefore disposable income, has been eroding probably for the last 10 years. But this growth is jobless, the same way that we had during the era of President Thabo Mbeki. 43 consecutive quarters of positive GDP growth, but we did not have commensurate growth in jobs. And as business, we say, creating jobs is not in and of itself. We are creating markets of the future. But also, even if you look at where the growth is coming from, it's not coming from those sectors where you can have outsized and oversized job creation impact. It comes from this big category that for now I'll call financial services. Not in mining, where we used to employ 980,000 people whilst we're the world's biggest gold producer. Not in manufacturing, not in agriculture, where you don't even need skills to work in farms. Not in tourism and hospitality, where we absorb women in great numbers. Not even in information communications technology, where we can start creating our own timber and building our own fourth industrial revolution skills. But also, we're not even making hay whilst the sun shines, because we now have this commodity super cycle. But we're not putting anything away. In fact, we live from hand to mouth.
Living from hand to mouth, if Professor, if you'll allow me to get in there, is something that is of huge concern, especially as we try and understand youth unemployment, right? Where you have a young person who says, I am actively looking for a job, but it's become too expensive for me to do so. Looking for jobs and then trying to move around has become an expense in itself.
Absolutely, Mempo. Because if you are a young person and you want to send your CV to Investec and you live in Orange Farm, first, only 14.6% of households have direct access to the internet. Therefore, you don't have that access. You don't have a smartphone. You don't have a laptop. You don't have an iPad. So you have to walk to the nearest internet cafe to take this paper and probably fax it to try and get a job, or to scan it so that you can use their own email facilities. So you can see that we are condemned before we even start. So Mempo, we are not even looking forward with great anticipation to the release of Q3 numbers. Because remember, these Q2 figures exclude the 2 weeks in July where we saw the rampant looting. They exclude the Transnet cyber attack. They exclude the fact that there's congestion at the Durban port, which has now been rated the third from the bottom. Lastly, remember that in June and July and even in August, Eskom was still switching off the lights in this rolling blackout. So each time the lights go off, the economy loses 1 billion to 2 billion a day every day. In fact, it probably wipes off another percentage point. You talk about the new Minister of Finance, Ntate Enoch Godongwana. He said it will probably take us up until 2023 for us to recover from the 2 weeks in July of rampant looting. But he also said it has taken off probably an entire percentage point from our GDP. So that's 2 percentage points, and we're growing at only 1.2%. But for me, what I mourn more than anything else, Mempo, is the fact that when you take tally by the 19th of July, because of this looting, because of cutting our own nose to spite our own face, we now had more than 354 lives that were lost. These are the poor people that have to bury them. 150,000 jobs that were put at risk. 5,000 informal traders that we are trying to encourage young people to form, because in any mall, 90% of the tenants are small and medium enterprises. 148 schools were vandalized or had their equipment stolen, while one school was destroyed in a fire within 1 hour in KwaZulu-Natal. And yet we know that education is the shortest way in which one can transcend social classes. 40,000 businesses were affected. 200 shopping centers were looted and damaged, with 30,000 stores that were vandalized. 1,400 ATMs and 120 million rand were stolen. 161 liquor outlets, and of course, 113 communications infrastructure, and 11 warehouses, and 8 factories. Not even the blood bank was spared, or the 90 pharmacies were isolated from this absolute madness. We probably stole 1.5 billion rands worth of goods stock just in Durban alone, not in KwaZulu-Natal. So when Massmart released their results 3 weeks ago, they said, this is just one shot. They lost 1.3 billion rands worth of goods. So the GDP impact to KwaZulu-Natal is 20 billion. To the nation, that's 50 billion. And yet, we are the ones that need to be doubling up, to be working hard, to be having these conversations with young people to try and make sure that not all of us are absolutely lost, Mempo.
Absolutely. And the various experts like yourself have been speaking to the importance of decisive action at a time like this when it comes to sprucing the economy. But when you speak of decisive action and you're preparing to address young people, inspiring them to venture into entrepreneurship, what are we talking about? What is this decisive action? And it's all very well to say, become an entrepreneur and, you'll be able to earn an income. But not everyone is designed to become an entrepreneur. What should young people be considering as they think about entrepreneurship? I've asked you 2 questions in one for the sake of time, Professor.
You're absolutely right, Empowa. So first of all, we'll be saying to them, because you actually have no option, necessity is a matter of invention. So how do we reinvent ourselves as a people with great natural endowments? You then say you can stand at the street corners, or you can go and rob people, or you can go and queue at the post office for a 350 rand. Now we are having a different conversation with them. We are saying you are worth much more than what you have become. So create something, do something. Plant potatoes, spinach, and sell it to your neighborhoods. Go to the slaughterhouse, buy meat and sell it at 3 times the price. And be entrepreneurial. Take a camera, take photographs, and go out, so that even as you are hustling, maybe, just maybe, somebody might see you and then give you a permanent job. Go to those factories that are close to you, even though in Orange Farm they are very far and they depend on trains, and say to the people, if you can't hire me today, I'm not going back. Allow me to go to your parking lot and just wash some cars. Because a lot of greatest, magnificent, wonderful people that I know started very low, because 27 years into democracy, we have all, not collectively, have succeeded in eradicating the legacy of apartheid. Lastly, we are saying to young people, you know, entrepreneurship sounds like a big word. Actually, when 4 or 5 of you get together and then you say, but what does my community need and what can we provide now? A lot of people get into taxis to go to town to go and get these things and get the taxi and come back. Can you bring those goods and services closer to them and so that you can try and help them? Lastly, we say link up with big businesses. You see, gone are the days when we as big business, we looked at poor communities like Orange Farm, by the way, it's the biggest informal settlement, and say they need our charity, our corporate social investment. No, no, no. In fact, they need access to our value chain so that when you are discovering, you say, but I want all my air conditioners and all my lifts to be installed by black businesses.
Professor Mohale, we're going to have to leave it for now. I thank you for your time. Always wonderful chatting to you.